Good morning, Melissa.
Good morning, Chris. How are you?
Good.
Good.
It's a brisk morning.
It is a brisk morning. I went for a run this morning and I was pretty cold by the time I got back.
Boy, I took my daughter to school and it took a while to defrost the car.
Yeah.
I admire you for going out and running, boy.
Luckily, it's not really too terribly far. Maybe a mile total, if that.
Okay. Well, that's still something. That's good.
Good morning.
Hey, Michelle.
Good morning, Michelle.
So before anybody else hops on quick, Chris, I talked to John Buccino yesterday, which I'm gonna briefly talk about this during the revised draft overlay zoning amendments.
Okay.
He's working with Zeppos from Willoughby's, and this overlay is gonna, from what he's saying, probably make that project happen. He's also working with Mitnick on the 220 North Park Road site.
Awesome.
He said that's a bunch of New York investors with a lot of money, and the only reason it's taking so long is because there's some leaseholders in that space that have longstanding leases that they need to either ride out or buy out, and they're waiting to get the right mix of tenants, one of whom may be a medical marijuana dispensary, which fortunately for him, it's permitted by right there. So,
Well, which property is that? You said on Park Road? The Mitnick one?
it's
Yeah.
Yale Electric down to
Oh,
AZ
yeah.
Vacuum.
Okay. And is it just the frontage or does it go back
For C3 or for the property?
for the property?
It goes all the way back to where it dead ends into the Kinsley site.
Okay, so there's quite a bit of real estate there.
Yes.
Good. Good morning, Mr. Jadik.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for letting me in.
Sure.
Melissa, was Dave Boucher the only one who said he couldn't attend?
That was the only one that responded back, yes.
Okay.
Morning.
Good morning, Keith.
Chris, I'm not sure how much longer the beard's going to last. It's not going over well. I'm getting conflicting votes at the family.
Yeah, I'm having some of the same issues. My wife had been supportive for a while, and now she's becoming more reserved about my appearance. So I'm not sure if it's going to last through the holidays.
I saw it. My 7-year-old granddaughter held up a sign the other night on one of our FaceTime things. No beard. But we've got my stepson's getting married tomorrow, and they're putting the tent up in my yard today for the outside. What was a 200-person is now a 15-person catered dinner in my yard.
Oh boy.
200 people in Lancaster down to 15 or 16 immediate family in the yard.
That's a shame.
Yeah.
Wow. But it's good they're going forward. I mean, you have to continue to live your lives through all this.
Yeah, they're both attorneys in Washington, and they've got a career path that is on a timeline.
Okay.
She works for Jones Day, and he's in Homeland Security. So they've got timelines where they clerked for a federal judge, and now they're doing this, and I think they're trying to figure out when the children might arrive. And
You know, it's amazes me when I meet young couples who have, you know, schedules like that. It's very interesting. I mean,
they're both sort of anal retentive. They're both Notre Dame law grads, and they actually the one that just went in, they had her as a professor.
no kidding. No.
They said she was a wonderful individual, but so they're very timeline. They've got a plan.
They sound like engineers or accountants.
Well, yeah, they could have been either one, but they chose law, I guess.
And it's your daughter who is at Jones Day, is that right?
It's my stepdaughter. It's my stepson getting married to. It's his fiancee's at Jones Day.
Okay, I got you.
She clerked for a federal judge in Portland for right after law school, and then they both moved to Washington, so they're both in D.C. now. They got into that yesterday right under Governor Wolf's travel ban, and one of the other kids are coming from Virginia, so they're all coming in the day before they have to quarantine.
Okay.
Still outside. And
I worked in DC at 2 different times in my career. It's a fun city for a young person.
yeah, they enjoy it. They've got an apartment over near the zoo. I forget the name of the area, but it's near the Washington Zoo.
You can hear the lions roar at sunset.
Really?
I don't know if they ever have heard that, but it's one of the unique things about that neighborhood.
I'll ask them. They're right there near the embassy.
You can hear them around here too.
That's you at 5 o'clock, Bill.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone.
Morning,
Good
Bill.
morning. Melissa, John Woodward just called me and said he was having problems logging in. Oh, never mind. He's on.
So what's the deal with the travel ban?
Governor Wolf said that anyone coming into Pennsylvania from another state as of November 20th, they either have to have a negative COVID test within X
72
number of
hours.
hours, or they need to quarantine for 14 days.
That's not bad. Because my youngest daughter wants to come from Europe on December 18, and I keep telling her not to come.
I've got a friend coming back from Holland on the 20th. He's been over there for 2 months, and I'm not sure what he's going to do.
I hope she can go back because she's in school in Europe. So my fear is that she won't be able to go back.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay, John, I'm finally here. Sorry I'm a couple minutes late, but let's call the meeting to order. Do you want to have a roll call, Melissa, please?
Yeah, sure. John Woodward,
Here.
Dave Boucher said he would be absent today. Fred Levering,
Here.
Bill Jenks,
Here.
Keith Durr,
I'm here. John, I had told Melissa I've got an appointment at 9 that I've got to leave my office about 8:45, so I'm just going to drop off around then, but I'm here for now.
I think you'll be good. You'll be good to go.
Thanks.
and Greg Portner. And I didn't see him.
And who else do we have in the call? We have Mr. Jadick here, and anybody else?
I'm here. I'm just listening in. It's Jody.
Okay, that's great. How about public comment? Is there any public comment?
Not from me.
Okay. Well, let's move along. Do you want to take us through the agenda here, Michelle?
Sure. So the first topic is the Berkshire Mall. You're all aware, Chris, John, Jim McCarthy, and I met with the attorney for the Berkshire Mall back in September. At that point in time, he was indicating that it was very important that the potential redevelopment and subdivision of the mall be fast-tracked. We were waiting for him to send us a site plan so that I could do a zoning review to determine how much and what type of zoning relief would be required for the new mall ownership to be able to accomplish their redevelopment plan. I was getting a little nervous because I've reached out to Mr. Gavin a few times since that meeting and kept being told it's coming, we're still working on it. I did reach out to him early last week, and he said that they've kind of switched gears to a different plan. The anchors that would take over, I should say the tenants that would take over the empty anchor spaces are on board with the plan, and that it would take a little bit longer to accomplish than their original timeline. And then early this week, I and Jim Babb both received an email from an engineering company questioning, fees and the land development approval process for both the borough and the county for a parcel on the, I guess that would be the northwest corner, also known as the gas station of the
Northeast. I think
I'm sorry.
northeast. I think it's northeast.
No, that would be west. East.
All right.
I'm not going to say the potential tenant because I don't have confirmation of that yet. It's just, I'd say it's more substantial than a rumor, but it's not officially confirmed. In talking to John Buccino yesterday about a completely unrelated project, we were going over a bunch of different things going on in the borough. And he also shared that the area to the south of the driveway that comes in at the Boscov's entrance. So the parking lot, there's that like storage area back in the corner where they have a bunch of like tarps over, I don't even know what's back there with tires. That's another, I think 3 to 4 acre parcel that would be one of the subdivision pieces. They would subdivide that off and then do some type of pad site there for additional tenants. So none of this is coming from the mall, but the fact that people in the real estate world are talking about it and have, knowledge about it, to me is a good sign. So stay tuned. I'll let you know as I find out more.
I was thinking of northeast of the intersection, but it's northwest on the parcel tract, I guess.
Correct.
Okay.
Michelle, I had ran into somebody who told me they were interested in the Sears Automotive Center, and I think he had talked to you about it, but he wasn't, nobody had gotten back to him yet. Or I think it was about a week ago I ran into him, and he said nobody had gotten back to him yet. Is that still active?
He's reached out to me a few times. The attorney for the mall only indicated that they had also spoken to him, but not that there was necessarily any interest in signing a deal or that they were moving forward. And what I've been contacted about by this engineering company is not part of that potential use.
He had just said he had left a few messages for, I think he was originally talking to their attorney, and then nobody was calling back.
So they're still proposing to subdivide the anchor stores, right? And to create some other parcels.
That's what it sounds like, but I'm not being told that officially by anyone from the mall.
All right, because I haven't heard what's really different from what they had previously proposed.
When we were talking before, I don't recall them talking about subdividing and creating those new parcels on the corners. I mean,
Okay.
they had talked about, at other mall properties that they own, they have like that outer ring of pad sites and possibly doing that, but they weren't talking about, the gas station and the other corner specifically. So the interesting thing is I know a request for a dedicated left turn signal into Greenwood Mall has come up again recently. And McCarthy's office in TPD looked at that and said, the accident data isn't there to warrant doing any type of study to push for going to PennDOT to get the turn. But if they would subdivide these two parcels off and do any type of development, knowing when the mall wanted to do that about a decade ago, PennDOT got involved because there's no actual HOP for that driveway. So any improvements they make to that driveway is going to require an HOP to be issued, meaning, we could potentially make the push then for getting that dedicated left turn in, looking at traffic volume.
We've been talking about that for years. Do you think necessary?
Well, that's where they'd have to do the traffic study and the information would come out of that. I mean, Jim McCarthy's feedback to, I think it was infrastructure, was don't waste your time doing the study and the money on the study because we don't think the data is there to warrant going to PennDOT to request the dedicated left turn. But in this case, any changes they make to that driveway, because it's on a PennDOT road, they're going to have to go to PennDOT to get an HOP, and PennDOT's going to require some type of study for them to do that. So the information may come out of that to prove once and for all whether it's warranted or not.
Yeah, I thought Jim said the other day that the mall would probably be required to put that left turn lane in.
I wasn't at infrastructure, so I don't know about that.
Well, I think what he was saying was that it could be that a development project at the Berkshire Mall would warrant that improvement, and if it did, then they could be made to pay for it. But that doesn't mean that it will be warranted. I mean, it'll have to be studied. I think Jim's point was just that if something at the mall would trigger the need for that improvement, they'd have to pay for it or at least contribute to it. What I think will be interesting is an issue that's similar to what we've had around VF on traffic and and some other utility usage, is that the historic use, when the property was at peak occupancy, is higher than it is now. And when you add new development, you may be just restoring some lost traffic rather than exceeding what it had at its peak. So it'll be an interesting analysis to see if there's really traffic improvements required. Because all of us know when the mall was at its peak, what the volume of traffic was. And I don't think it's close to that at this time.
Well, yeah, the Woodland Road, State Hill Road, at its peak on weekends, they were like a parking lot.
Yeah, and it's not like that now.
Well, think of what the mall parking lot was like during the holiday. I mean, I remember even when I started working for the borough back in 2008, from this time of the year until maybe the second week of January, I wouldn't take State Hill Road on my lunch break or to go home because it was like a parking lot from everybody going to the mall to do their holiday shopping. And how quickly in 12 years that's changed.
Well, I recall when I worked part-time mall security, Dave Boucher gave us authorization to go out on the public roads and direct traffic to get people in and out of the mall because it was just a mess.
Yeah. Anyway, all of that will have to be reviewed when there's a project in front of us.
So I have to apologize. I'm having computer issues here, and my computer techie person, AKA my daughter, is coming home this weekend to get me straightened out. So I don't have the agenda in front of me. But Michelle, do you want to comment on the Reading Eagles request, or is that later in the agenda?
I was going to do that under miscellaneous.
Okay. Well, you might as well do it now.
Okay, so I was contacted earlier this week by Andrew Culp, who is a reporter for the Reading Eagle. He was asking if he could do an interview with me to talk about what he was describing as a glut of commercial properties for sale around the Berkshire Mall and in Wyomissing. I said, sure, I'd be happy to talk with you so I can speak intelligently. Can you give me a list of the properties you're going to be asking about? So he sent me a link to, what is this? It's the crexy.com. So it's, I guess Fred could probably speak better to this than I could, but it's a website that pulls up through all of the various, like Remax of Reading, NEI Keystone. You can hone in on a geographic area and then search for commercial, industrial, whatever type of properties you want. So, I mean, the properties he's going to be asking about are Longhorn Steakhouse, Wawa, UGI, Teleflex, the Tower Health Building, Plaza Azteca, the Urig Building across from Borough Hall, the Crown Plaza, and then Jeff Hettinger's piece of Wyomissing Square, Brickstones, and then the office building. And my impression from talking to him through email is he's trying to put a COVID pandemic bent on this, that all of these properties suddenly went up for sale because, you know, the market's taking such a hit and these restaurants and retail locations are taking a hit because of the pandemic. And in reality, looking at every single one of these properties, that's not the case for any of them. And I talked to John Buccino about this yesterday too. Equus has actually already had a $118 million offer on Teleflex, UGI, and Tower Health. They turned it down because they think they can get more. It's right now for especially a property like that where it's newly developed, there's long-term leases that still have 19 years left. It's the best time for someone like Equus to sell. In the case of the Red Lobster, Plaza Azteca, and Longhorn, when Namdar bought the Berkshire Mall, the way the debt was structured, those 3 out parcels, which were owned by the mall as well, went along with the debt. So Namdar had no choice but to buy the restaurants if they were going to buy the mall. First of all, they're not in the restaurant industry, they're in the mall industry. And second of all, I mean, what John said to me is that those are not, you know, they're not selling them to shed them. They're selling them because the market's ripe right now to sell them as, you know, they can make money off the sale of those properties. I also take that all of these properties are for sale anywhere from the tune of $2 million to a package deal on Equus's property at $130 million. If they would all sell anytime in the near future, that's a pretty hefty transfer tax that would be coming to the borough. So I'm not seeing anything from these properties being for sale that's a negative or that's, you know, foreboding for the economic future of the borough. And you know, the reason John Buccino actually called me yesterday was to talk about 2 other development projects on the North Park Road corridor, both which would have a significant impact on that neighborhood. One, what he described as New York investors that have a ton of money that want to stick a pin in the map to kind of piggyback on what Equus has already done. So I'm going to try and explain that to this reporter. I asked John if, you know, he gets a call from this gentleman later this week as well, you know, he can thank me for sending him over there, because I think John would have a lot of insight to give him from the real estate perspective. But I wanted to make the committee aware of this article is coming at some point, I would assume in the next 7 to 10 days. And no matter how they spin it, I don't see that these properties being for sale is bad news in any way, shape, or form.
I like your approach, Michelle. I would prefer to hear your spin than a doom and gloom story.
Well, I mean, you're all familiar with John Buccino. He attended the economic development meeting. I think that was back in April or May when we asked him and George Haynes to talk about the impact of the pandemic on what they were seeing in the commercial market. John's very familiar and has brokered a lot of significant deals, not just in Wyomissing, but also in Berks County with the real estate market. So if he's telling me like, these are all good things and, you know, they're all investment sales. And he also made a really good point, you know, Customers Bank building, the Urig building across the street from Borough Hall. He's like, that's a case where that building's not vacant because, you know, of a loss. They're vacant because they needed more space. They took on additional employees and had to move to another location because they outgrew where they were. So I think I have enough firepower to spin it in an optimistic way, not a doom and gloom. But I just don't see any supporting evidence that any of these properties being for sale is because of a negative trend instead of a positive trend.
Hey, and plus it gives us, you know, some free publicity to say, hey, Wyomissing's open. We're willing to do business.
And just a suggestion, I don't think the way I would look at it, if this was happening at the beginning of COVID, that would make sense somewhat. But now that with all these vaccines, it's a hopeful, and I think they have a better chance to sell now than, some other time. Anyway, that's my take. I think it's definitely not a COVID idea. I agree with that.
Well, actually, several of these properties, like 501 North Wyomissing Boulevard and the Customers Bank Building, have been for sale for over a year. John said he had the deal brokered on 501 North Wyomissing Boulevard, and then the current owner, he's like, I had a great deal lined up for him. Everything was ready to be signed and settlement happened. He's like, and the owner made some demands at the last minute. The buyer wasn't willing to meet, and the deal fell through. So, I have an explanation I can give for every single one of these properties and why they're up for sale. So that's the good news.
Good.
Hey, Mr. Jadick, you had time for public comment at the beginning of the meeting, and I wish you would be silent at this point. And you want to move on, Michelle?
Sure. Next topic on the agenda is the revised draft overlay zoning district regulations. That Chris is working on revising the draft amendment based off the review comments we got from the County Planning Commission. We need to then send that back to the county. Once we're in a position with the county that, we've addressed all of their comments, we can then advertise and adopt. In talking to John Buccino yesterday, both of those projects on North Park Road will be using the overlay once we adopt it for redevelopment. And what's interesting is he was somewhat aware we were working on something, but he didn't know the specifics of it. So I sent him the most recent draft with the caveat, hey, we're making some more tweaks to this based off the county letter. And he's going to take that back, and his comment was, at least for the one project, it's going to have a significant impact because, if you think of the building coverage and reduced setbacks alone, if you're looking at a lot in the C2 district, using the underlying zoning versus the overlay, you can pack a lot more in using the overlay. And in this case, they would be using structured parking. So, that makes it even better.
Yeah. My goal is to have that together sometime next week so that we could talk about it at the Borough Planning Commission meeting. We're also going to need to send it back to the county to get another review.
Sounds good.
I'm hoping it'll be ready for action by council in January. That would be my current schedule.
If nobody has any questions, I'll move on to the next agenda item. So the Reading Berks County 2030 Economic Strategic Plan, I am a member of that committee. All meetings have been put on hold since September. First, so the county could deal with CARES Act funding and awarding that funding to applicants. And then after that was resolved, they put it on hold to deal with the election and post-election. So I expect we're going to be resuming meetings sometime in December, or they may just postpone until after the holidays, but we should be resuming sometime in the next 30 to 60 days. And for those of you that may not be aware, Pam Schupp, who was with the Greater Reading Chamber Alliance, has now officially moved under county employment. She's the Director of Economic Development for the county. And if nobody has any further questions about that, I'll move on to the next agenda item, which is a DEP grant for electric vehicle charging stations. I believe I briefly talked about this at Infrastructure last month and the Planning Commission. I'm not going to take up a lot of your time talking about this, only because there's still a lot of research I need to do. I met with Aaron Gantz, Nick and Bezzy from West Reading, and Jamal Abdallah from the city of Reading via Zoom about a month ago, just to see if they were interested in further researching the topic and potentially partnering on a joint grant. And then Nick asked if I reach out to Mark Radcliffe. So Mark and I met last week. Mark's the why can't I think of his actual title now?
Main Street.
Thank you. Main Street Manager for West Reading. Mark and I met last week, and he sent me some email that was included with the agenda when it was sent out to you. There's a company called ChargePoint that is a manufacturer and provider of electric vehicle charging stations. So there's information in there about ChargePoint's program, what they offer. And then I had also attached to the agenda when it went out an email from Colleen Terry, who's the borough's grant writer, who had clued me into this program. I still need to do a lot of homework, and I'm going to set up a meeting with Alex Javers from ChargePoint about, how exactly do these stations work? What is the out-of-pocket cost outside of the station itself? So we're going to have to run conduit for electric. There would be admin time for monitoring the system, electric cost, things outside of just putting the system in. So I want to do some homework on that and find out more information. And then have information I can bring back to you that we know for X number of stations it's going to cost the borough Y to install them. And then also take that information back to West Reading and the city of Reading, because at least in West Reading's case, what Mark expressed to me is based off their budget numbers, if there's a somewhat significant cost of even $5,000 to $10,000 out of pocket to run conduit and do other things for all the stations, they would have to find a way to fundraise that money. So the good news is the grant program covers up to 100% of the cost at $5,000 per station for a government-owned, on government property station that's available to the public 24/7. Colleen's told me whether we do it alone or we do it, with 2 or 3 municipalities, we have an extremely high chance of getting awarded funding, because this is one of those programs where a lot of times there's more funding than applicants. And Mr. Jadek, I know you had brought up, I think it was at infrastructure, or maybe it was planning commission, about the different levels of charging stations. These are level 2 charging stations. The level 3 charging stations, from the research I've done, cost 100,000 plus.
Right.
So I don't know many people that will be installing those with or without grant funding, because it's a pretty exorbitant cost. But at least with level 2, talking to one of my friends over the weekend that has a Tesla, she said when she goes to a charging station, she's not worried about getting a charge back up to 100%, because she's typically only doing that on a road trip. Otherwise, she's charging at home. She's worried about if her battery's down to say 10 or 15%, getting up to about 60 or 70%. And she's like, for me, it takes about 40 to 45 minutes to get from a 10% charge up to about a 60% charge.
Yeah, but that's a Tesla. Don't confuse the Tesla with what you're talking with ChargePoint here. That's why I'm saying I think we probably need to talk separately, because there's a lot to talk about this. But Tesla has unbelievable speed and power. Level 2 is basically what I have in my garage. And to charge at level 2, it takes 8 hours. Nobody's going to stay for 8 hours in the middle of nowhere, and then go home. It's very important. Level 2 for money, it's a waste of money. If you plan to put a level 2 charger and charge for the charging, you're dead. That nobody's going to use that. I would vouch for this. Level 2 charges is okay, and I've seen it done at some hotels. You come there, you put your car, go to the hotel, take a nap. Next morning, the car is done, and it's free. That will work. If you do level 2 charging for money, they put them at IKEA. Nobody bloody uses that. I don't need to go there to pay an exorbitant amount of 40 cents or whatever the thing is per kilowatt. For what?
Adrian,
Yes, sir.
Chairman Woodward had asked that you refrain.
I agree. I hope it helps, sir. I'm not trying here to go out of anything. I do have extensive experience, and I'm ready to talk to Michelle and explain and show. You're free to come to my garage. I'll explain it. So I'll shut up now.
Well, this again is also why I said there's a lot of homework that I need to do before I can make any type of recommendation to the committee, both in talking to ChargePoints and any other EV station providers. But at least for now, I wanted to update the committee on where I was at and just get a general feel for, are you interested in me moving forward with getting more information to bring back to you on this topic?
Well, is this something we should maybe wait a little, like a year till it gets more efficient, or I don't know.
I don't know that in a year it's going to get more efficient, but there's two enrollment periods or application periods for this grant. One is typically at the end of February, the other is in September. So, I mean, no, there's no immediate rush to do anything with it, but I'd still at least like to get the information from Colleen, from DEP. I did find places, there are level 2 charging stations in Berks County. There is actually one in Wyomissing at the Hampton Inn. So, you know, I want to go check those out. I want to talk to the people that provide these things and actually find out what the cost is and what we're talking about.
I don't think it hurts to continue to explore it. Michelle, had you told me that if they're put on government properties, the cost basically is free?
The cost for the stations is covered up to 100%, but there's always going to be an out-of-pocket cost, like running the conduit. So, I mean, again, those are things I don't currently have answers to that I need to get you answers to.
I think it's prudent to continue to explore it, because who knows who may come in and, at some of these properties and want to do something along this line. And then we have the answers.
I wonder if it would make sense to share this information about the grant opportunities with some of the apartment building developers that we have in the borough right now. I'm thinking at the Met or at the, whatever, the Wyomissing Square, the other apartment projects that we have. It may be appropriate for that situation to use the kind of charging capability that, is available here.
Well, in the same way we're pushing for, when we rewrite the saldo and, like the project that just came in on Van Reed, we're pushing for multimodal. This could be something we start requiring for certain types of residential or office uses. The private property owners I was going to reach out to are Equus, because, at the knitting mills with the UGI employees and others, possibly putting one. I had actually gotten an email after the land development plan was reported asking from a resident for a charging station at Wawa. Wyomissing Square, the Met, and Wynwood Park, which is on North Park Road, and then also Woodland Plaza, which is over across from the mall. So, those are some potential sites, and then obviously also the hotels.
I would include the Highlands on that also.
It's a good idea.
It's Fred. I need to ask a dumb question, and I have a comment I don't want to forget about. But on these charging stations, I understand the cost of installation, and who pays for the juice to charge up your car? Does the consumer stick a credit card in this thing, or do we pay for that?
No, the consumer sticks a credit card in it, which is why I need to look at admin costs to monitor and maintain all of that as well. Okay, all right. That's what I was guessing, but I just wanted to know. We're not giving away free electric.
No, good. Well, that ain't peanuts, believe me. The other comment is that those attachments that you put on the agenda from Mark, one of them, when I opened it, it said, be careful, it could damage your computer or whatever. And naturally, I just plowed straight ahead. But darn it, it did make my computer freeze up. I couldn't get it to go. I shut the computer down and a sigh of relief, it came back to life and seems to be okay now. So I'm just warning everybody, be careful about that. Whatever, I don't know why that happened or what that attachment had in it, but be careful. I went ahead because I trusted Mark, really.
Yeah, that is odd, because not only do we have like a malware scanner on the borough email, so when something comes in, it scans for that and won't let you open it. But I've opened them several times on my personal and work laptop and haven't had any issues.
Well, it was the one, as you look at the computer screen, there were the 3 buttons across the top, the agenda, and then the first one, it was the second one, the one to the far right that I got that message on. My company has been very sensitive to those things over the years. We have a very extensive IT department and stuff. And I don't know, maybe it's something that we have on our system that warns you or whatever, but it said it could damage your computer and it did make it freeze up.
Well, hopefully I'll get some new attachments from Alex, when I speak to him at ChargePoint, that I can send out that won't create that issue. Does anybody have any, oh, sorry, Chris.
Well, I just want to say I downloaded and printed them out and I didn't have any issues. So I don't know if it may have been Fred's system or something in the document. I don't know.
That sounds like a memory issue for that computer. It froze up not because of a software or virus. It's just too much graphic at work.
Mr. Jadik, I don't want to have to ask you again. Please remain silent.
Well, the man needs an answer. I mean, whatever.
Well, he can get the answer himself.
Obviously not, but it's fine.
So does anybody have any other questions or comments regarding the DEP grant and EV charging stations? No? If not, the only other topic on the agenda is miscellaneous, which I already covered what I was going to speak about with the Reading Eagle article. Does anybody else have anything?
I do. A couple things quickly. How about the whole Tower Health DUCOM situation? Is that still on track? I mean, is the Tower Health or Reading Hospital's financial woes, is that going to impact the medical school at all?
It is not going to impact the medical school, and they still are on track to open third quarter of 2021.
And the retail space up from Brickstone, that's still on hold, right?
That is still on hold. Unfortunately, the pandemic did kind of shutter that for now. I feel like that project's a little doomed. I mean, that it's taken how long for them to get to the point that they were finally ready to pull a building project or building permit for the project, and then they do, and literally within weeks a pandemic hits and the country shuts down. So
You need to have an exorcism of that property.
possibly. Now the good news there is I've been told the restaurant tenant that would be located on the west side of that shopping area underneath the apartments is still on board. The hair salon and the gym that were supposed to be part of that obviously are not, at least as of now. But the restaurant to me was the biggest piece for adding a little bit of vibrancy to that area, so that they're still willing to move forward when the time is right and they're ready to do so, to me is good news.
So, Chris, does your firm do such exorcisms of businesses or not?
No, I don't have that skill. I think we don't have a class in that in law school.
Well, they have continuing ed, you know. How about one more thing, Michelle, and then I'm done. How about the potential grocery store that kind of fell through, right?
I mean, I can't say that it's potentially fallen through because I've not heard confirmation or denial from Equus as to the status of that potential lease. I can only say that George Haynes reached out to me about 2 weeks ago asking if there was any type of tax break we could offer that potential tenant. And I gave him the unfortunate news that, you know, short of going through the process of fitting out the space, and then when the county reassesses, appealing the assessment with the promise the borough would not fight them on that reassessment, no, there was nothing that I could offer him. But I think that goes back to the bigger picture issue of needing a countywide reassessment to level the proverbial playing field. And until that happens, the issue that, you know, is impacting this site, which is this particular tenant was making the point that the property tax would be lower on the main line in Philadelphia than it would be at this site in Berks County. So, you know, how do you how do you market an area and make a point that it's a great idea to develop and open a location here when someone's going to be paying significantly more taxes than they would in a more urban area where they, in theory have higher foot traffic, higher vehicular traffic. And that's unfortunately a problem the borough can't solve. That comes down to the county commissioners.
If any concern the borough would make, it's the school district has the hammer on what the assessment situation is. But anyway.
Well, typically the school district leads the charge on appealing the appeal of the reassessment or fighting the appeal of the reassessment. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're
Anyone
welcome.
else?
Yeah, one thing, Michelle, you want to just inform everybody about the parking lots that we talked about of Headingers, just so if anybody else should hear anything, they have the answer.
So Jeff Hedinger reached out to me about a month or so ago, notifying me his intent was to close the 3 parking lots, one directly across from where Viva/Brickstones used to be, the other's mid-block in the 900 block of Hill Avenue across from where the retail commercial space underneath the Wyomissing Square Apartments is, and the third is at the corner of Penn and Reading. And the reason he's closing them from November 15th through the end of March is because of the cost, the significant cost of snow and ice removal over the winter months. He's only closing the parking lots. He is not prohibiting public access on the sidewalk around the lots. He will continue to keep the sidewalks clear of snow and ice over the winter months. He did send letters to all adjacent property owners about 2 weeks before the bollards and the chains went up. There are no structures on any of these lots. So when Bill and I had talked about this, his concern was emergency access. There's no structures that, the fire department or the police department would need to get to. And, worst case scenario, they could either drive up over the curb or drive through the chains. They're not significant chains. They're enough to keep a car out, but not enough to keep a police car or a fire truck out. And, from a zoning standpoint, because the commercial space, Brickstones, and Headinger's office are all closed with the available parking that is still on the site, the off-street parking requirement of the zoning ordinance is still being met without using those 3 parking lots. So, what I said to Bill is, this is no different than him as a private property owner deciding he doesn't want to shovel his private driveway over the winter and putting a chain across it to not allow anyone else to use it because they were trespassing. If anything, the neighbors have benefited, both residential neighbors and commercial neighbors, in having these 3 parking lots their customers could effectively use for the past couple of years, but they're still private property and the owner still has the right to close them off as long as the parking requirement for the other operating uses is being met, which it is.
So Michelle, Stone is not going to reopen ever, is that correct?
Brickstones is not going to reopen ever. That is correct. Mark DiGiovanni did reach out to myself and Troy Hatt a couple weeks ago and confirmed that he is, for now, going to focus on Austin's and Coastal Grill, and it is what it is.
On those parking lots, are there people using them now that don't have permission? I mean, is there a trespassing issue that they're trying to deter?
I think people have historically used, look at your common motorist. Oh, I need to go there, and there's a parking lot that doesn't have any signage in it stating, private for the use of X business only. They're going to park and take the path of least resistance. I don't think there's ever been a trespassing issue. The fact that, Jeff went the extra length to send letters to all of the adjacent property owners, just explaining from this time period to this time period, for this reason, it's going to be closed. I don't think he's ever minded other people or businesses using those lots. He just wanted to make them aware for these months, you can't do that.
Yeah, according to what Kara had told me, that, he's always been very willing to allow people to use his lots. She was just little taken back when she got this letter, saying that the lots are going to be closed.
And that's why I always caution business owners, especially along Penn Avenue from the 800 block down to like the 1400 block, that don't have a ton of off-street parking, whether they're grandfathered non-conforming, which most of those businesses are, meaning they've always operated with a reduced number of parking compared to what would normally be required in the zoning ordinance. So they're allowed to continue doing that as long as they don't expand the use to require more parking. Like if they're going into that situation thinking, oh, well, there's a parking lot across the street that, has never been an issue, my customers can just park there. Well, yeah, that's the case today, but that doesn't mean that's going to be the case in a year or 5 years. So you really need to think about that and what you have on your own property meeting you and your client's needs.
It's Fred. The vast majority of the problem with those parking lots and cars ending up on them tends to be surrounding residential people. That's the story that was in West Reading at the big lot in the middle of on Penn Avenue there in front of the Rite Aid. These spots that we're talking about is primarily clogged up by surrounding residential use that doesn't have anywhere else to go. And actually, it's that sort of use is not that lot owner's problem.
Yeah, John here at the Spruce, and I got signage on my lots only because I don't mind if my neighbors park there, except for the fact when it snows, if there's 10 cars on a 55-car lot, it's a pain in the rear end to plow the lot. So, I have signage now, and I won't have them towed, but I'll have them ticketed. But, it's problematic. Anyway, does anybody have anything else? If not, the meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a happy Thanksgiving.
Same to you.
Thank you. You too.